There's a shape in nature that can hold up more weight per pound of material than almost anything we build. It sheds hurricane winds instead of fighting them. It uses roughly a third of the material a box-shaped home needs to enclose the same amount of space. And it terrifies nearly every mortgage lender in America. It's the geodesic dome. Today we're breaking down why it's structurally brilliant, what it actually costs to build one in 2026, why almost nobody builds one anyway, and why the thing that actually kills most dome projects isn't the framing, it's the paperwork. The physics of a triangle start with the physics, because this is where the dome earns its reputation. A conventional stick-built home is a box. Every wall carries load straight down to the foundation, and every corner is a stress concentration point, a place where forces pile up and framing has to work harder to compensate. A geodesic dome spreads load completely differently. It's built from a network of triangles, and triangles are the only shape that can't deform without one of its sides changing length. Bolt enough triangles together into a sphere segment, and load isn't carried by a handful of walls, it's distributed across the entire skin. Engineers use this same principle in aircraft hangars and stadium roofs when they need to span huge distances without interior columns. It's not a novelty trick, it's the same math NASA and the aerospace industry rely on for structures that can't afford to fail. Buckminster Fuller and the scaling advantage. The geodesic dome, as we know, it wasn't actually invented by the man most associated with it. A German engineer named Walther Bauersfeld built the first one in the early 1920s while designing a planetarium projection dome for Zeiss. It was the architect and inventor Buckminster Fuller who patented an improved version decades later and popularized it across the United States. Fuller liked to point out a specific mathematical advantage. Double a dome's diameter, and its surface area only quadruples, but the volume it encloses multiplies by 8. That's not dome magic, it's basic geometric scaling that applies to any shape, but it means bigger domes become proportionally more material efficient, not less. A small dome gives up some of that advantage. A large one gains it, and the material savings are real and measurable. For the same enclosed square footage, a geodesic dome typically uses only around a third of the framing material a rectangular home needs. That's less lumber, less steel, less waste hauled to a landfill. So on paper, this is the strongest, most material-efficient shape you could choose for a tiny home. Which raises the obvious question. If it's this good, why don't we see domes on every street? Struts, not studs. Here's where the myth-busting starts. A geodesic dome isn't built from repeated wall panels like a rectangular home. It's built from struts, and depending on the dome's frequency, how finely it's subdivided into triangles, you can end up cutting anywhere from 2 to 6 different strut lengths, each with its own precise bevel angle at both ends. On a standard wall, a framer cuts the same stud length over and over at 90 degrees. On a dome, every connection is a compound angle, and one strut cut a few degrees off compounds around the entire sphere. That's why dome kits exist. Manufacturers pre-cut and pre-drill every strut and hub connector so tolerances are controlled in a factory, not on a windy job site. Kit versus stick-built, that precision costs money, but maybe not as much as you'd expect. Prefabricated dome kits typically run somewhere between $30,000 and $50,000 just for the shell materials on a mid-sized home, with fuller ranges stretching from around $10,000 for a small kit up to well over $100,000 for a large high-end one. Skip the kit and stick frame it yourself, and you need a crew that's actually built a dome before, which is not easy to find in most markets. Labor becomes the expensive line item instead of materials, which flips the normal tiny home budget on its head. On a conventional build, materials and labor are usually a fairly predictable split. On a dome built by a crew learning as they go, labor can blow past the materials cost entirely. The upside is speed, once the crew knows what they're doing. A well-organized team working from a pre-cut kit can raise the entire shell of a mid-sized dome in a matter of days. Not the weeks a conventional frame takes, because most of the precision work already happened in the factory, not on site. What a dome actually costs in 2026, let's put real numbers on this, because vague ranges don't help anyone budget. As of 2026, a fully finished geodesic dome home shell, foundation, and interior typically runs between $100 and $250 per square foot, which lands right in line with a conventional wood-framed home's cost per square foot in most markets. That's the detail most dome content gets wrong. The dome itself is not dramatically more expensive than a normal house per square foot. What drives the price up is everything downstream of the shell. The shell and foundation together usually make up 40 to 50% of total cost, and the interior flooring, cabinets, custom-cut drywall, finished carpentry eats up the other 50 to 60%. For a small, genuinely tiny dome home in the 400 to 600 square foot range, that puts a realistic finished budget somewhere between $50,000 and $150,000, depending heavily on finish level and whether you're hiring a full crew or doing some of the work yourself. Building it yourself, if you have real construction experience, can shave a meaningful chunk off that number. Some owner-builders report saving close to half the total project cost. But that savings assumes you already have the skills, tools, and time. Hire everything out and you're paying full market rate on both materials and specialized labor. Hidden costs nobody mentions. A few costs consistently blindside first-time dome builders. Triangle-shaped windows cost more than standard rectangular ones, and framing any opening in a curved shell is more labor-intensive than cutting a square hole in a stick-built wall. Shingle roofing over a dome is a specialty job. Most roofing companies have never cut shingles to fit interconnected triangle panels, and that inexperience shows up in the quote. Site preparation and drainage work can add another $10,000 to $50,000 depending on your lot, and that's before you've touched the dome itself. Add in permits, land survey costs, and a construction contingency, and it's easy to see how a project that looked like a $60,000 kit balloons into a much larger total. On the other side of the ledger, domes genuinely do save on energy costs over time. Their reduced surface area and continuous shell mean less heat loss than a box with the same volume, and owners regularly report noticeably lower heating and cooling bills. That's a real long-term offset, it just doesn't show up on the closing statement. A geodesic dome doesn't have a roof and walls, it's one continuous shell, which means every seam between panels is a potential leak point, and there are dozens of them instead of the handful of roof-to-wall transitions a normal home has. The common myth is that domes are inherently leak-prone because of the shape. That's not quite right. The real issue is that dome seams need waterproofing that's consistent at every hub and joint, with zero shortcuts, because water finds the one seam the crew rushed. Builders who do this well use a continuous membrane system under the exterior skin, plus panelized shingle or metal systems designed specifically for compound angle roofs. Get the detailing right and a dome is genuinely watertight and durable, arguably more wind and impact resistant than a conventional roof. Get it wrong and you get the horror stories. Slow leaks at hub connections that go undetected for years because they're hard to inspect from inside a curved ceiling. This is also where resale and insurance headaches start. Homeowners who've lived in poorly detailed domes for decades report struggling to find standard homeowners insurance at all, precisely because insurers see the same seam-related risk that appraisers and lenders do. The fix isn't cheaper materials, it's paying for a crew that has actually detailed dome seams before. Curved walls look incredible in photos. They're miserable for furniture. A standard sofa, a kitchen cabinet run, a bed frame, all designed for 90-degree corners. In a dome, everything touching an exterior wall either needs custom-built furniture or has to float in the center of the room, eating into usable floor space. There's also a gap between total square footage and usable square footage that dome sellers don't advertise. Because walls curve inward as they rise, headroom near the perimeter drops fast. A 24-foot diameter dome sounds spacious, but the fully stand-up, furniture-friendly footprint is meaningfully smaller than the same diameter gives you in a rectangular home. Appraisers even have a term for this: functional obsolescence, meaning the layout itself reduces usable value compared to a conventional floor plan, regardless of how well the home is built. The workaround most experienced dome owners land on is simple. Build interior partition walls as standard flat walls set slightly inside the dome's curve, and let the gap between the flat wall and the curved shell become storage, shelving, or mechanical chase space instead of wasted air. It doesn't recover all the lost square footage, but it recovers the part that actually matters, where you put your furniture. Here's the obstacle that ends more dome projects than bad weather or bad framing ever will: money. Appraisers value a home by comparing it to similar properties that have sold nearby within roughly the past year. In most counties, there simply aren't any comparable domes, which means an appraiser has no reliable way to assign market value, and a low or unsupported appraisal is one of the fastest ways a loan gets denied. Conventional lenders lean on guidelines written with standard construction in mind, and a lot of underwriters flag a geodesic dome as a non-traditional structure, triggering extra scrutiny, a higher down payment, or an outright decline. It's not a law against domes, it's risk aversion. Lenders don't like financing anything that's harder to resell if a borrower defaults, and dome homes historically sit on the market 3 to 5 times longer than a comparable conventional listing. Here's a detail most dome content skips entirely. Fannie Mae's own guidelines actually address the comparables problem directly, rather than treating it as an automatic disqualifier. Where truly comparable sales don't exist, guidelines allow lenders to adjust the required down payment percentage upward instead of rejecting the loan outright. In practice, that means a dome buyer who can put down 25 to 30% instead of the conventional 5 to 20% has a real, guideline-supported path to approval, not just a hope that an underwriter feels generous. A small number of specialty lenders have built a business specifically around unconventional homes, dome homes, log homes, earth-bermed homes, and will underwrite loans, including VA and USDA-backed options for qualifying veterans, that a local bank or credit union will typically decline. They're not hard to find with a search, but they are worth calling before you order a kit, not after. The realistic paths forward. A specialty construction loan from a lender who's financed non-traditional builds before. A larger cash down payment to offset risk. Using an existing home's equity as collateral, or paying cash and refinancing later, once the home has a completed appraisal and some resale comps exist nearby. To make this concrete, here's what 3 different dome projects actually look like on paper in 2026. The basic build: a small dome in the 20 to 25 foot diameter range, built on a simple foundation with modest finishes in a suburban setting, typically lands in the $28,000 to $45,000 total range, shell, foundation, and basic labor included. This is the entry point. Livable but tight, and best suited to a true minimalist tiny home footprint. The mid-range family dome step up to a 40 to 50 foot diameter dome with standard insulation and mid-tier interior finishes, and the realistic total lands between $60,000 and $150,000 once you include foundation, labor, finishes, and permits. This is the size range most families actually building a dome homeland on, big enough for real bedrooms and a functional kitchen, without premium tier costs. The premium custom dome at the top end, a 60-foot plus diameter dome with premium finishes, custom staircases, and integrated systems like solar or geothermal, can run anywhere from $140,000 to well over $375,000. At this size, some of these projects exceed $100,000 in interior finish work alone. Notice what doesn't change much across all 3 scenarios. The shell and foundation stay roughly 40 to 50% of the total, no matter the size. The variable that actually swings your final number is almost always the interior finish level and the labor rate in your region, the same 2 factors that swing the budget on a conventional home. The dome shape isn't what makes these projects expensive. Inexperienced labor and high-end finishes are. If you're seriously considering a dome build, start with the money side before the design side. Call a specialty construction lender in your area and find out what they'll actually approve before you order a kit. And ask specifically about the down payment adjustment. Fannie Mae guidelines allow for homes without local comparables. Most loan officers won't bring it up unless you ask. Drop a comment if you want us to break down specialty construction loans in a full episode, and if this saved you from a surprise appraisal problem, subscribe, because we cover the financing side of unconventional builds every week. A geodesic dome is one of the most structurally honest shapes you can build. It strong because the math says it has to be, not because of clever marketing. It uses less material than a box, sheds wind and weather better than most conventional roofs, and in 2026 it doesn't actually cost dramatically more per square foot than a normal home once it's finished. But cheaper materials don't mean a simpler project. Labor, waterproofing precision, and custom interior work absorb the savings fast if you hire a crew that's learning on your dime. And the real barrier was never whether you can build one. It's whether you can finance one, and that's a conversation to have with a lender long before you fall in love with a floor plan.